We're live. Hello. What is up? Oh, and Chuck is here. We at least got the audio working.
Yes, we got the audio going, man.
We're good. And I that sounds like I'm taking some credit. I did absolutely nothing. I sit over here saying, "Hey, Chuck, are you ready? This going?" So I don't know. Maybe I encouraged you through badgering. That's probably what it was.
No badgering at all, man. It was just rough. I was trying to launch this StreamYard, but it doesn't open up with Safari. Had to download another app. Had to download Chrome and all that good stuff. So
It's a whole thing, but
yeah,
I'm glad we at least we can get your voice and in podcast quality. That's great.
yeah,
That's
it
amazing.
sounds pretty good according to you. I mean, I assume you're telling
Yeah,
me the truth.
yeah, sounding pretty good. And if you can hear Chuck, then let us know in the chat. But tonight we're going to take a look at a few different things. Chuck, I have to ask you a question
Okay.
as we get started. Uh, are you just scared out of your mind because all the banks are collapsing?
No, because I owe them money, so good for me. You know what I'm saying?
Bank error in your favor.
Yes,
Um,
indeed. You know, maybe I'm jaded. I've been here too long in this kind of fringy dark world, and when I hear it, I'm just like, yeah, maybe it's about time. And maybe I am being a fool and naive and not prepping properly,
hmm.
but it just doesn't bother me so much. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, what's the next step? Because I feel like it's just the first step in something else, and we're gonna, I mean, in some way or another, establish another version of a financial system, and it might be heading in that direction sooner rather than later.
Yeah, if you've been in this sort of fringy space for a while, if you've been called a conspiracy theorist, if whatever, if you've been here, it's almost like, why hasn't this happened before? I feel like we've been talking about this for forever, the financial system collapsing. Yeah, it started to happen, and it was almost like you're saying, it's like, kind of jaded. Like, yeah, I expected it to happen. But here it is. And the reason I bring it up and the reason why I wanted to talk about this tonight is because um it feels like a lot of people are talking about it. I have a lot of people, maybe they come in hushed tones, they whisper, you know,
Mm.
hey, so what should we do? What should we do now? It's all happening. And almost in that way where they're afraid. It's more than, well, it's something to look into, kind of prepare for it. Some people are afraid. What's going to happen? That's actually what I've heard. So what's going to happen? And I wonder if part of it is with the different bank collapse. What does that even mean? I thought the bank like had money. Like, how does that work? How does a bank collapse? What are treasuries? What are stocks? What does it mean? What does it mean when the interest rates rise? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Like, a lot of people don't know and understand how a lot of the mechanisms work, and so they're very reliant on someone else telling them it's going to be okay. Just do this, or you really need to do X, Y, and Z. So I feel like there's a lot of the unknown, and that's really what's sort of driving some of the fear. People been talking to you about this, Chuck?
Uh, Not really. So people are kind of unaware in my circles, other than me and you. So everyone's they just kind of mention it almost like in passing, like it's not a big deal. And their lack of concern kind of just tells me where they are in the matrix as far as
Oh yeah.
being red pilled or blue pilled. And most people are just like, yeah, it's just either they're like, oh, that's just a scare tactic, no big deal, uh, completely disregarded, or I haven't heard anybody, to be honest, quite concerned at all.
Hmm.
But when I heard it, I was kind of like, all right, this is a next step in something. And I was just gonna just it just perked my ears, and I know I got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a look at a few different things here. So, as we normally do, we go to Twitter as the bastion of truth. So, Twitter, just go. I just searched, or I put bank failure up in here. and to look. And some of this you're going to get, it's just kind of tagged. So some of it's going to be interesting. You don't even have to listen to this video. You just see the chart and it looks like a downhill ski map. And you know that it's probably not so good when it's red. That's how you know. If it's in red, it's probably bad.
Right.
But
I mean, that's what they put up for, like, to be aware of global warming and things like that. Like, ooh, look at how hot it is, but it really hasn't been as hot as people claim. But anyways,
it's never been this hot since 1970. Um, yeah, but you look at this here, Silicon Valley Bank collapses, biggest US failure since 2008. So there's the comparison there. So depending on how old you are, you have been alive to experience multiple recessions and then the downturn in 2008. Is this a repeat of 2008? I don't think it is. These are completely different things that are taking place. The second biggest bank failure in US history took less than 48 hours. Now, the other side of this is that it took place over the weekend. And I think that's always kind of been in kind of the fringy circles that if there's an economic collapse, it's going to happen on a Friday afternoon. So you have the whole weekend before the banks open back up, the markets open back up. That's kind of what happened. Is these things happened on a Saturday, I think, but it started happening earlier. U.S. bank regulators have seized Silicon Valley Bank, largest bank failure again since 2008. Too big to fail. All these different things, right? Inflationary nightmare. So there's a lot of these things that are coming out that people are wondering, should I be concerned? And maybe most people just really aren't paying attention. So on one side, you've got Silicon Valley Bank. It's a very interesting story. If you do you know the story behind Silicon Valley Bank?
me?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I actually, that's the first thing that caught my attention. And I was seeing the videos about people making the lines, and they're really panicking about their money and things like that. So, that's the first thing I heard, but I didn't look into it.
Yeah. So Silicon Valley Bank, I mean, just being called Silicon Valley, the thought is, oh, is it connected with, the Silicon Valley kind of, business spheres? And it very much is. Uh, Silicon Valley Bank is one of these banks that would put out the money for a lot of startups and new ventures, things like that. And so, if you were very much in the industry, then sometimes it was even required in contracts that you would open bank accounts with Silicon Valley Bank. And it almost became like not don't please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying this is like an organized crime kind of a thing, but it almost felt like kind of a mobster kind of thing. Like you would join this crowd and you had to bank there. That's who you had to set up your accounts with, or at least some of your accounts with. So it felt very interconnected. And it's not just for Silicon Valley. It's just that Silicon Valley kind of business model, that new venture kind of model. So you had uh, people in Norway and in Denmark and Germany, all over all over Europe and in different places. They were using Silicon Valley Bank, and it's just really a bank mechanism having also to do with interest rates that kind of brought the thing down. They set up kind of interesting long-term strategies that now with inflation all started to lose the money, so they had to offload. But this is interesting here. Some people are blaming Peter Thiel. Said he bought 50 million in gold to hedge against bank failure, and then withdrew his millions from SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, sparking a bank run. And there's something to do with him where he basically did kind of put out there, hey, it looks like they're losing money on these things, so pull your money out. And it almost sounded like he was sort of giving a message to people he was connected with, say, hey, you might want to take your money out. And that kind of sparked a higher level run on the bank. So Sorry for the profanity in the text. It was not my post and not my intention. But that's what kind of seems to have started some of these different things. It really was just they did everything they were kind of supposed to do. They didn't have to pick the long-term securities or treasuries. They could have picked the short-term ones, but they kind of got bit in the butt. I think that's the technical term. They were bit in the butt financially here because these long-term investors started losing money. The big problematic thing is we do have the FDIC that insures this stuff, insures your deposits. You've probably seen the sign a million times going into the bank, or if you don't go into the bank anymore, you may not have. But the FDIC is supposed to insure accounts up to $250,000 for those deposits to be recovered in case of something like this. But the problem is that they're using the fund, which I think has about 144 billion in it. I can't remember now. 125 billion, something to that effect. They're using that to bail all the deposits out. And so not up to 250,000 per account, but they're using it to bail everything out, which means you're going to run out of money a little bit sooner. So it's sort of dishonest in that way. They say no bank bailouts. Well, this is essentially a bank bailout.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this fits with what you're talking about, but my wife kind of sent it to me at random. It's kind of timely because you mentioned at last minute, "Hey, can you join real quick?" and this whole thing. And so I just thought I might share it if you don't mind.
Oh
At
yeah,
least at
absolutely.
least the sound of it. So,
Yeah.
tell me if you can hear this.
All right.
Crisis hits, the elites are
Can you hear
planning
that?
to freeze the financial system.
Okay, here we go.
Thing. When the next crisis hits, the elites are planning to freeze the financial system, and they'll replace it with a new system, one not based on the US dollar. When that happens, we'll wake up to a very strange and disturbing new reality.
And for our viewers that are watching today, what might their reality look like that morning? How does this manifest?
First, they'll have gone to bed knowing that a massive financial crisis was underway. But when they wake up, they'll find it has worsened and the contagion has spread worldwide. When they go to withdraw money, their ATM will say closed temporarily. When they go to sell stocks, their account will say transaction not available. When they go to their local business, that business will only accept cash if it's open. As citizens realize they're being barred from their money, riots will erupt. It's going to get really bad really quickly.
How would such a freeze actually work? And wouldn't that be highly illegal?
Well, it wouldn't be illegal technically because they've been quietly laying the groundwork for years. They've rigged the financial laws, changed the rules of the game to allow this to happen. The stage is set. They have the levers in place. The lights are positioned. Now someone just needs to flick a switch and they'll impose ICE 9 rapidly. And again, all of this will be legal because they've rigged the system in their favor. One thing.
Yeah. So that guy, I forget his name, but he worked with, Trump's presidency and other presidents, and he's big on like teaching you how to not allow the banks and the government take control of your money and assets. And he even has a way that he teaches how to emancipate your assets and different things like that. And of course, very much pro buy silver, gold, and different things like that. And
Yeah.
he said that not too long ago. So again, these kinds of things have been around, like we said in the beginning of the show, for a while, and it's kind of like as it starts to happen, I guess to me it's like, oh yeah, just like we said. So it's not like
Right.
it's not really surprising.
It's not a surprise. Yeah, this banking system that we currently have, and if you were getting into fringe kind of stuff, if you were into conspiracy theories like in the past 10 years, probably earlier in that 10 years, there's a lot of discussion about the financial system. Let's kick it back maybe even 20 years. There's a lot of discussion of how do you sort of break down the current system that we have. And there was a lot of attempts at educating people on the system that we do have right now.
Which
And I think if
inevitably connects you to 9/11.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the whole thing too, is I think that's why it became such a big deal, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, is because 9/11 had such a huge impact. Yeah, absolutely. And the announcement the day before, on September 10th, 2001, when let's see, who was it? It was Rumsfeld, I think. Rumsfeld comes out and says, "Hey, we can't find," I think it was $2.3 trillion. Pentagon lost it, or not sure where it is.
No big
And
deal. I mean, dude,
yeah,
I get in trouble when I don't explain the $5 at AM PM, so
that's right. That's right. Well, you deserve that, Chuck. That's the difference. But the thing with this is that it is connected in. And I think partly, and we're actually going to look at a scripture here in just a few minutes that I think has fueled a bit more of the fear around this. But yeah, there's the current system we have is called the fractional banking system, which is based on debt, which essentially means, if you could break it down into a sentence or two, that for every dollar that is lent out or that is created through a debt, like you take out a loan for $1,000, that bank can say, look, that $1,000 worth of debt exists. They can then lend out another 9,000. And so I don't think you have to be a math whiz to figure out that's not going to make a whole lot of sense later on. But the idea is that if you have that amount in, people usually keep a large amount in their accounts, right? So they have some stuff to work with. The frequency that people pull out all their money, they sort of play that game. It's almost like some sort of Vegas venture almost. They're just betting that you're not really going to take all your money out.
I'm wondering this time if it's going to affect the 401ks of the world, the Roth IRAs and the insurance policies. I mean, I just got an insurance policy, me and my wife, and so that same company is offering Roth IRAs, and we did mention our concern. Well, I mentioned the concern about where the economy might be going, and they're like, "Oh, no, don't worry." I mean, and then actually, it's funny that they, the first thing they said, "Do you remember 2008?" Well, even if we get as bad as that, we during that time we still grew, yada yada yada, and all this stuff. But I'm like, yeah, but it's gonna be different this time,
Something different is happening. Yeah, this is so you have that old system. I think it's important to bring that up, and I'm really glad that you brought up that idea, that concept of the whole system kind of coming down. So in order to replace the system, you have to get out of the old one, and it is just so difficult to motivate people to move from any old system to a new one. Just look how difficult it is for a lot of people if they change like their phones. It's like, I hate this. It's new. I don't like this. And a lot of people are like that. Once they got things set up, let's just keep it set up.
like Android to iPhone, just
Yeah.
like a big old ruckus.
Or just think about this. What if your bank changed routing numbers? How big a pain is that? You have to go and change it on all these different things, and
Have
all of
automated already.
all my bill pay is set up, all of that. My reoccurring donation to Fire Theft Radio, I have to fix that. So all those different things, you have to all of a sudden go back. So imagine doing that on every single financial thing you ever did. Like changing the system over is just insane. So there's a push for a new system that has been in the works for a really long time. So I've pulled up this website here. It's kind of cool to have as a background anyway. This graphic going on here. Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker. So if you search CBDC, you'll get a whole bunch of different things. But this Atlantic Council here actually has a tracker. You'll see here, what exactly is CBDC? CBDC is a virtual money backed and issued by a central bank. Now, what's interesting is the United States actually doesn't have a central bank. The Fed acts like a central bank, but it isn't technically the same kind of central bank. It's not actually a government-run bank. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. So that we actually do it. And it says, as cryptocurrencies and stablecoins have become more popular, the world's central banks have realized that they need to provide an alternative. Why would you need an alternative to crypto? I guess that's what they're trying to sell. But if you look at this world map here, you can hover over different countries and see what their progress is So I don't know if you realize it, but there is a concerted effort to move the entire world onto a digital dollar, a centralized digital dollar. And Pakistan is in the research and retail. Azerbaijan even is in the research area. You'll notice, and this is why I think you're going to see geopolitics shift to Africa. Look how white Africa is. I didn't realize how weird that sounded, but look how white Africa is. Right
Gonna get
here.
canceled, bro.
I know. I barely gotten started. Just get canceled. But you've got these different countries here that have varying levels of this. Nigeria, look how far along Nigeria is. Nigeria is actually farther along than the United States. Now, why do you think you would want to get different countries in Africa dialed in to a digital currency even before a large portion of the West? You can look through Europe and the United States and Canada.
Maybe because they hold wait, is that a rhetorical question? Or
No,
are you
go ahead
asking?
and answer. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the few continents that holds a lot of actual physical wealth like gold, silver, etc. So you would want them not to depend on such things and instead depend on this one world financial dollar, electric dollar kind of thing.
Yeah, the Europe, United States, and parts of Asia are so locked into the current system that they have to unravel it. In Africa, they have a lot of areas on the continent that are not as developed in those ways, as in they don't have centralized structures or regional structures that are really as set up some of the others, and so they basically get to jump the line. You might actually see Africa leap forward in digital currencies because they don't have to unravel much. North America is a different story. So Canada is a little farther along than the US. The US has pesky things like states that kind of make things go slower. And that's because the US doesn't have a central bank.
There's certain things that definitely kind of fall flat because of the individual nature of how certain states can govern their laws, right?
Exactly. And we actually have a good example of that. Look at the date on this. March 13th of this year. So just a couple days ago. South Dakota governor moves to block CBDC bill that excludes crypto assets from the definition of money. Now, this is actually, I think, one of the more important things to happen in the past few days. So while everyone's talking about Silicon Valley Bank, these moves are starting to sort of ripple in different places. In South Dakota, they blocked the bill because it excluded crypto assets. So there are different bills that are going through for digital currencies that are leaving out the crypto market. So they're just going to jump to a centralized currency, digital currency. So looking here, just grabbing a quote from here. It was sold as an update to the guidelines for uniform commercial control backed by all our financial institutions, our banks. As we started reading through it, we saw the section of the bill that changed the definition of currency. And essentially, what it did was pave the way for a government-led CBDC that also banned other forms of cryptocurrency, i.e. Bitcoin. For most people, that's going to be the one that they know. So Governor Noem says, so for me, that clearly was a threat to our freedom. Now, that is actually the right term because a cryptocurrency allows you to use that not just in the United States, just everywhere. It is something that can be used all over the place. So anyway, this is something that is currently happening. These things are currently being discussed. They're being even brought before state houses. for voting. So this is not something that's going to happen in a few years. This is probably going to happen while we are being distracted by something else. They're going to move
Yeah, I
forward with
mean,
something.
wasn't some of this stuff pushed forward because of the pandemic? Interestingly enough, they were pushing forward a lot of laws that would set up for this type of financial system. And even our homie Klaus Schwab was like, this will present a lot of opportunities to move forward this new financial era, and also talked about how there's going to be uh, digital or sort of like crashes in the future, like internet crashes and all kinds of stuff, so they can, there's going to be internet viruses, like almost like as if he knows exactly what's going on. So I don't know. Again, this could be the first step of all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's being discussed all over the place. So this is from 2020, March 24th, 2020, almost exactly 3 years ago. U.S. Democrat bill for COVID-19 plans digital dollar for stimulus to unbanked. So I'm sure what they're presenting is the problem is we've got a portion of the United States that is totally unbanked. So we have to think of a new way to distribute the stimulus that people need so desperately during this pandemic. That's my paraphrase. Yesterday, Democrats in U.S. Congress published a draft bill for COVID-19 stimulus, which included the introduction of a digital dollar or central bank digital currency. So this is from 2020. They're trying to push these. And they're trying to hide it in stuff that normally people would say, yes, this is in this horrible dynamic. A stimulus would really help out a lot of people. Of course we should do that. And they'll just kind of slide that in there. But for the most part, there are people who had no idea what this thing even was, right? The draft Democrat bill introduces the concept of a digital dollar, which represents either a liability of any federal bank or the money redeemable at a bank. So this was meant to replace the money that we had. Do you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, they even had the coin shortage? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What was that all about? It felt like there were signs for it everywhere, but nobody was really talking about it. Did we just stop making coins?
Yeah, no, they were talking about shortages in metal and all kinds of different things. And I mean, I know and if people don't know me on your show, I mean, I work for Coca-Cola, so I highly depend on a lot of raw material needed to function in my business, to function in the job that I do. We need cardboard, we need metals, we need aluminum, different sorts of metals, CO2, which is contained in metal containers and yada, yada, yada. So all of that stuff was kind of at a halt, and there's a lot of stuff not available because metal wasn't available, and therefore currency wasn't available, physical currency, and a lot of stuff of like, why pass the dollar around, because that passes the virus around. We should go digital. And again, those conversations were being had during this time.
Yeah, that was silly. I was like, how is a respiratory disease traveling on money? How does that work?
I don't know. It's a risk I'm willing to take if you're going to give me money.
Although, I guess if they say that there's a certain percentage. No, what is it? There's a certain amount of cocaine that has made its way onto most dollar bills because, that's maybe it's just in films in the 80s. That's what they used to try to take that drug.
Was it?
Yeah. So maybe there are people sticking dollars up their nose where they get COVID. I don't know. But that was always weird to me that was a thing. Oh, and I remember there were people who were like washing their bags and their boxes. So you have an Amazon package and they're like disinfecting the box. You remember that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We should pull up all of those things and just
we need to
laugh.
remind people how ridiculous they were being, and the absolute absurdity of things. I mean, the people that couldn't visit their family, that were sick, the hugging with plastic bags.
Oh my goodness.
And like all these daily talk shows these daytime talk show. Oh, we're gonna allow this person to see their grandparents, and what we did was we provided this plastic shield where they can put their hands through, and it was so emotional and all.
Oh my goodness.
Gracious.
Can't handle it. I don't know. A lot of people, well, that's kind of the thing. When I started out on the stream talking about, we've got a new sort of air of fear. Fear is sort of coming back in a completely different way that people are experiencing it for the last few years. Fear is the easiest way to control people, a mass amount of people, is to make them all afraid of something. The bigger the scare, the better it is, because you can make everyone fall in line and then be upset when other people don't fall in line because they're scared. So you should be scared. You have to do whatever we have to do because of the big scary thing. And I'm being very general, obviously.
Right. I think I spoke with I did an episode over there at Fire Theft Radio, and we did a episode called the Wuhan Flu, which I thought was going to get taken down, but it didn't. But we spoke with Tracy Yates during that time, and he works at a post office, and he just, to test it out, kept telling people to do silly, absurd things, and they were like, "Why?" And he's like, "Oh, because of COVID." And then they were like, "Oh, okay. Oh, okay, I understand." And then, and it was like nothing to do. I remember it was like, "What, really?" And they were doing it. And he's like, "Yeah, as long as I said it's because of COVID, they were willing to do whatever."
Yeah, and that lasted for even till today. Why is this bank thing happening? Well, probably because of COVID. Why didn't that particular movie in the movie theater do well? Oh, it's because of COVID. You throw that at everything, and for some reason, people still believe it. Well, a certain percentage of people still do. But I wanted to kind of attack this from a completely different angle to kind of help people wrap their head around why we shouldn't be afraid. Before we do that, actually, we're just talking about COVID. And one of the words that was used in that clip that you played was, I think, a word that's going to be used a lot. So listen for it this week and next week. It's that word contagion. For some reason, they're going to be able to use the word contagion to make people think that the problems financially spread like a virus. And so if someone's associated with these other banks, that it's a contagion. The thing that happened there, you can catch it like a disease. And while they don't have to explain it that way, listen for that word contagion. I think that's going to be a word to listen for.
Should probably revisit that movie.
Yeah, contagion. I wanted to sort of talk about this in a different way. I'm going to pull up a passage which doesn't seem like it's a non-fear sort of passage. We're going to Revelation. Revelation chapter 13. And it's a pretty famous passage. Even if you don't think you know something from this passage, you know something from this passage. This is the passage, this chapter is where we get the idea, the concept of the mark of the beast and the number 666. We get that from this chapter. Now, how many different times have you been told that something over the past 3 years has been the mark of the beast or connected to the number 666? How many times?
Many, yeah.
Too many times.
Mm-hmm.
Too many times. But I want to point out a couple of different things from this chapter. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "Then I saw the beast coming up from out of the sea. Had 10 horns, 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadem crowns, and on its heads a blasphemous name." Now, just a little jump into eschatology or apocalyptic literature in the Bible, just in general. When you see horns and heads, that has to do with kings or kingdoms and power. A horn is generally connected to power in some way. But what you see here is this is it during these end times, during the time leading up to the return of Jesus. You have a period of time here where it mentions that a beast comes out of the sea and it has 10 heads, 10 horns. Verse 2 says, "Now a beast I saw was like a leopard, but its feet were like bear's feet. Its mouth was like a lion's mouth." It says, "And the dragon gave the beast its power." Now, all of this is to say is that you have multiple heads, multiple horns, you have multiple beasts. We could go back to Daniel that talks about 3 other beasts that are also mixed up animals. Kind of what you get out of this is it's not at this point a one world system, it's a multi-power system. There's multiple animals representing kingdoms, there's multiple heads representing kings, there's multiple horns, there's lots of different countries going on. And the reason I say all this is for some reason everyone has locked into their head that when you get to the Antichrist, it's one government, period. And so when they see things like globalists moving forward, they see that as this sort of, well, that means it's the end, except that you kind of see lots of different heads and horns and beasts. There's lots of different kingdoms and kings. And it's not a hell, yeah, just like a hydra. Lots of heads. It says, then I saw another beast coming out of the earth with 2 horns like a lamb, and he was speaking like a dragon. This one, it says, has ruling authority of the first beast on his behalf, made the earth and the inhabitants to worship the first beast, the one who had the lethal head wound. So there's obviously a lot of background in this, but the point of this is to all say, when we get down here, one of the things that most people are scared of with the mark of the beast is not being able to buy or sell. So it talks about these different beasts. It talks about these different kings. It talks about powers. You look at verse 16, he says, he also caused everyone, small and great, rich and poor, slave and free, to obtain a mark on their right hand and on their forehead. It said, or on their forehead. No one was allowed to buy or sell things unless he bore the mark of the beast, that is, his name or his number. This calls for wisdom. Let him who has insight calculate the beast number for his number of a man. The number is 666. Everybody remembers that part. Everybody remembers the last numbers. And this is, of course, has been blown out of proportion, been changed, whatever. And now anything that's connected with a 666, everyone jumps to this idea. It's the end of the world. It's a one world government. We're all going to die. But I think what needs to be highlighted here is the reason there has to be a system to enforce that law is because, according to God's law, according to God's people, this has no power. All right. And now I'm going to prove this here by going to Acts chapter 4. Now, in Acts chapter 4, you had Peter and John. This is the beginning of the church. Peter and John are brought before the Sanhedrin. They're made to stand before local government and have to answer for these things. You shouldn't preach Jesus. And they say, well, we got to obey God rather than men. They basically said, just stop doing that. And they let them go. It says, when they were released, Peter and John went to the fellow believers and reported everything the high priest and the elders had said to them. When they heard this, they raised their voices to God with one mind and said, Master of all, you who made heaven, the earth, the sea, and everything that is in them. We'll pause there for a second. Where does it say the beasts came out of? Came out of the earth. They came out of the sea. We can skip all that. We can go right to the Lord, right to the Father, who said by the Holy Spirit through your servant David, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot foolish things? The kings of the earth stood together and the rulers assemble together against the Lord and against his Christ. This is the original conspiracy theory right here. I'm going to skip down a little bit to here. Basically, they keep threatening us, but we're going to keep on doing what we're supposed to do. Look at verse 32. This is the antidote to all of this. The group of those who believed were of one heart and mind. No one said that any of his possessions was his own, but everything was held in common. With great power, the apostles were giving their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was on them all. For there was no one needy among them, because those who were owners of land or houses were selling them, bringing the proceeds from the sales, placing it at the apostles' feet. Proceeds were distributed to each as anyone had need. So think about that. Now I'll just ask you, are we really so locked in to the current system that we can't live that out? Are we so locked into the banking system as it is that if it all falls apart, somehow God can't intervene? God can't care for you, protect you? It kind of seems like from Acts 4 that it didn't matter what system there was. It said that they held things in common. If I have food and I have a brother and their family that's in need, guess what? We both have food. They don't have to worry.
Right.
I'm going to share. And then on that day when I don't have food, guess where I can go? I can go to the family. I can go to the family of God.
Right.
So and I think that some of the end times kind of scariness with, oh my gosh, a one world system, oh my gosh, one currency, oh my gosh, can't buy, can't sell, we're all going to die. No, you're not. You're not going to die. Because if you can't buy or sell, someone else has something to share with you. Jesus said to his followers, they said, well, we've left everything to follow you. And Jesus says, yes, you have. And you know it, because of that, even in this life, you will have 10 times what you left behind. Not because somehow he was going to become rich, but because if all of them were family, they all had those things in common. Right?
Right.
I think sometimes we just get too scared. We go like, I look at my bank account and that's all I can look at.
Right.
And that's all. Which is such a materialistic, atheistic view of the world.
Right. Right. It definitely tells you a lot about where the heart is in a lot of modern believers, because they immediately start thinking about everything they're going to lose, probably home, car, things like that, which are important, I understand, but in a world that is heading in a direction in which is biblical, might be a bad direction, but it is biblical. It also, like you said, provides, don't worry, there's a way out. I got you. And it could be the return of our Lord Jesus Christ. I don't know exactly when. I know me and you probably agree that eschatologically, we'll see. We'll see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so between that, I mean, me personally, I'm okay with things not going very well financially and almost post-apocalyptic type thing. But at the same time, I read the Old Testament and see how Israel was on the run. And when they were literally, I mean, no country, no food, no nothing, that's when God showed himself the most to them. So I feel almost, even though I know in the moment when I go through it, I'm probably be scared or concerned. I'm not saying I'm not going to doubt or fear or anything like that, but I'm going to say that there's a lot of evidence in the God that I believe in the Bible that I read, that he will be there in these times that are completely unpredictable. And we have no idea where there could be, where things could go, or where we are going to be in this place. Is the rapture nigh, or is it not happening? There's no rapture. It doesn't matter. Like I always tell people, because they argue about these things, like the end times starts coming into play when you start talking about the one world order.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, like pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, and all, millennial, and partial preterist. What are you? And I always tell them, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens, man. We'll see. And all I can do is I'm going to try to continue to provide for my family as best as I can, make decisions to try and even use this rising beast system to provide for my family in a sense, because we all kind of are part of the system, whether you are red pilled or not. Unless you are Amish, you're in some way or another contributing to the system.
Yeah.
And
Shout
if
out
you
to all
live
our Amish listeners right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're anything like that, then okay. But other than that, you live in a country that is basically the middle of Babylon in a sense. So, um, trying to try and survive by asking God for direction and then believing that He will provide such direction.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of the short view. I think all of us would like to be in a place where we know that our families are secure, that we know that no one is going to be hungry. We know that everyone's going to be educated and going to have what they need and be able to grow up in what we would probably call normal, right? Like we want them to experience the normal things that maybe it's something that we experienced when we were kids or younger or whatever. But the fact is that if we are those who call ourselves disciples of Jesus, or we say we want to follow God, and maybe you're watching this and you're like, I don't really know God, but I want to. Okay, maybe that's where you're at. Okay. Why would God remove all of his people during the time of difficulty? I'm not saying during a time of wrath or judgment. I'm saying during a time of difficult. Why would God remove his people from it? Wouldn't God deploy his people where they're suffering? Wouldn't God on purpose put his people in a place? Because guess what? What's the worst thing that someone can do to you in a time of trouble? What's the worst thing that they can do to you?
Right.
They could kill you and then you go to heaven. Ooh, heaven.
Right.
It's like the only thing they can do is send you to your reward. That's the only thing that they can do to you. So why wouldn't God send his servants who are secure in him and in the resurrection and the knowledge of his care and his grace? Why wouldn't he send them where there's difficulty and fear and suffering and hunger and all of
You'll
those things?
you'll really see who the believers are during that time. It really is going to be the time of harvest, right? Because you're going to
Right.
be like, wow, you're going to separate what is it, what
The
was
wheat and the tares.
the
Yeah.
wheat and the tares for sure. Because you'll see like everything that might look like a Christian or whatever. I mean, all of that's going to be revealed during that time. And I like what you said there, because I think people misread, especially the book of Thessalonians. When you read it and pay attention, um, we see that um, they were expecting Jesus to return because they were going through tribulation. You get me?
Right. They thought, oh, we're going through it now. This
Right.
must be the time. So
Yeah.
we'll do what
They
we need to
weren't
do. And then,
right.
yeah.
They weren't the opposite, saying, "Oh, you know, God's going to deliver us from horrible destruction and all this stuff or tribulation." It was the opposite. It's like, no, we're going through it really bad. They're persecuting us. They're killing us. They're murdering us by the droves. So now must be the time that he's returning. So that was
Right.
their understanding of things when that was being written. So I don't know.
Right.
It's just like we just got to pay attention to the context of scripture, and I think it gives us a little bit more
Yeah. They were
insight.
expecting to have suffering happening. So when suffering happened, this must be the time. Our brother over there at Midnight Mysteries posts, and we don't see that anywhere else in Scripture. Noah's family, children of Israel, the new church, etc. And I think what he's referring to is we don't see them being removed out of the suffering. We see them going through the suffering,
Mhm.
right? And yes, even in James, it starts up by saying, "Consider it all joy." Right?
Right.
You're supposed to consider it joy when going through different difficulties, trials, tribulation, those different things. We count it joy. Why do we count it joy? Because we just love going through terrible times? No, because we know that God's at work. And so if we're in it at that time, we know that God is doing something through us or will do something through us. That's an exciting thing. That's an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah. Definitely. I feel like a lot of guys are built for this, like, yeah, ready to be a martyr.
Yeah,
But
some people are. Some
yeah,
people are
I
just like, yeah, if I go,
definitely,
I go. Yeah.
yeah, I definitely don't feel like I'm gonna look for that. I'm not one of those guys, but it's just like I feel like certain things, if they have to happen, I will more than be willing to give my life. If my family's in danger, my kids, like you just got to do it. You just
Yeah.
have to be in the midst of that. And I know I've had a few situations where I thought we were about to be in danger by some people, and I was just immediately like, let's go. You know what I mean? Like,
But you know what, Chuck? It's because you're thinking through those things before they happen and you're making the choice before it happens.
right.
And I think that's what we have to do. So maybe here's what I personally think about this whole banking thing. I don't think this is the time where everything's going to be falling down, but I think there's enough shaking going on in this for you to say, are you really ready? I know that my wife and we changed a couple behaviors. We said, okay, we're going to prepare for this. I wish I could turn the camera. You could see our stockpile of food over here and medical supplies and things like that. We even have extra like printing paper. Like,
Send me your address in the DMs, bro.
but we're prepping some things like that way. But we're an earthquake country. We should have that anyway.
Mhm.
Midnight Mysteries also posts here, to a church that was scattered, being tortured, persecuted. All of these things were reality to believers. And just because American Christians aren't experiencing this to the same extent, it
Or
doesn't mean that
Canadian.
people, or Canadian, yes, Canadian, uh, don't want to say that that's something that the rest of the world is not experiencing. I mean, right now, there's actually more persecution, scattering, torturing, things of that nature going on to the church that has
Ever.
ever happened ever.
Right. And it's never talked about. It's one of the
No.
things I wanted to talk about, because it's the time where more Christians are being killed for their faith. And I personally have had conversations with family members. They're like, "Oh, that stuff doesn't happen anymore. That stuff's things of the past." I'm like, "Wrong, my friend. It is
Yeah.
happening more frequently than it's ever happened in human history." And it's just one of those things that it's just kind of swept under the rug because it's Christianity.
Yeah. And you know what? The time may come where it comes here too. And when it does, the Lord's going to take care of us the same way he did in the early church, the same way he does in areas of the church now, or the church that's in areas where they experience this, that the Lord is going to take care of us. And in fact, the church grows all the more during the time. Do you know why? Because most people then lose their connection with everything else, or at the very least, they lose their faith in things to help them, protect them, to give them security. That has all failed. So they have the Lord to look forward to. They have the Lord to look towards. They have Christ, and the promise of the resurrection, the Holy Spirit. These are the only things that some people may have. And so when the Lord allows us to go through those times, it's because there's something much better that he's offering us, what we have around us a lot of times. Midnight Mysteries again states, and remember that the last days is referring to when Jesus ascended to when he comes back again. So we're technically in the last days. Yes, when that promise of the resurrection was secured, we entered that time to share that with the Gentiles, time to get that number that will be brought in, bring them in. And yeah, these last days, I know
Yeah.
it's weird to say days when it's been thousands of years, but
That's my
that's the
boy
time we're in.
Zeber. That's my boy
Yeah.
Zeber.
Anyone
I
watching
like him a
here,
lot.
if you haven't watched anything from Midnight Mysteries, go ahead and give them a follow on
Yeah.
Instagram. Go ahead and give them a subscribe here on YouTube's Midnight Mysteries.
Very
It's a cool
informative.
name.
It's funny. I was on my way to Hawthorne. I went to near SpaceX. I'm gonna do a little SpaceX tour soon, by the way.
Hmm.
And so I want to see if Daddy Elon is there. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna beg for $666,000. See if he perks his ears up. See what he says. You know,
Yeah. Maybe
interesting.
that's
He's
it.
asking me for this specific amount of money. I'm kidding. I'm not doing that. But on the way home, I was listening to Midnight Mysteries. Talking about ley lines and all kinds of stuff. Very informative
Oh,
show.
yeah.
Well researched. Gives you some like always. They most podcasts give you a lot of good. Sorry. Not all podcasts give you kind of like the juice, like the receipts for the information, you know.
Right.
I only do one or two tops because I don't have the patience, to be honest, to be posting that stuff on our show. But he's talking about where he gets and all that. So good stuff, very informative. I was really enjoying that show. The one
Absolutely.
about Netflix.
We're gonna have Midnight Mysteries on this show
Oh,
in the near future. I think we're
mira,
kind of chatting about
muy
that.
impresionante, Maverick.
Yeah.
Necesitamos hacer un programa en español. We need to do one in Spanish, man. Me and you. And you
Yeah.
just say, sí, vámonos. Es muy bueno.
Yeah. Just be like a soundboard. Say the 3 or 4 different phrases.
I'll walk you through it like it's like Dora the Explorer, you know?
Is that show with the guy dressed up like a bee? Is he still on Mexican TV?
You mean the one from The Simpsons? That's not real.
No, that's real, bro. It's from a real show. They were mocking the show.
Okay, yeah, I've never seen that show, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what you're talking
All right,
about.
because if that's just a thing, I'll dress up like the bee.
Okay, you'll be the bee.
I'll be the bee.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And I'll be some I don't know. There's so many to choose from. A lot of weird Mexican shows over here.
Okay, what I wanted to do, I know we're way off topic and
All
we're
right.
probably losing people,
That's
but
probably my fault.
what I wanted to do was to take a portion of a telenovela and just change the subtitles so it just says different things. And I mean, if you speak Spanish, it's not saying it, but no one else would know. You're just like adding the subtitles, so you can make it say whatever you want. I kind of want to do that.
And
I'll do that.
I'll have you fake sign language like that lady that got caught.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that later. some other stream. Well, the real reason I wanted to have this conversation was to at least give some people a hopeful perspective. We started talking about hopeful things and then talked about how we were going to be persecuted and martyred. So I tried to get us to that positive place, but no, in reality, there are things. Hopefully this bank stuff, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, what should I do? Here's what you should do. You should be prepared to take care of yourselves. And after take care of yourselves, your family, be able to take care of at least your neighbors. To the right, to the left, maybe 2 other people. If you can do that, at least that should be your goal. Get an extra few cans of soup every time you go. Or get some. I would recommend getting beans and rice if you can't get anything else. My wife is getting into the canning and jarring of meat.
Ooh,
There's certain ways to preserve meat.
Definitely want to get into preserving fruits and stuff like that for sure.
Those types of things, because those things are good anyway. And guess what? If they have a certain shelf life, they just get to have a little party and have everyone over, eat through that, and just keep doing that. But the more that we can prepare, not prepare just for us to survive, but prepare for us to be able to serve other people, the Lord then can use us. We can pray that the Lord would send people to us who are in need, and we'd be able to take care of that. And I know we're talking about banking things, so yeah. Have some cash on hand. You should always have some cash on hand.
And
Did you have some gold
and
and
now,
silver? It's a good idea.
A word from our sponsor, Patriot Supply Dry Food. I'm kidding.
Oh man, we should have gotten an affiliate link or something.
I know, right? There's definitely some stuff you need to. That's something I do want to get. Those like that dry food that lasts for many years. That's also important to have. I think when the pandemic hit. That was sold out everywhere in all these survival stores. Usually people don't touch it, but now every store you went to, that's kind of hard to find. So I think people woke up quite a bit during this last quote unquote pandemic because your life can crumble pretty quickly with just the order of the government real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to be out there saying, "Oh, buy all this crypto and you'll be fine. Get all this gold and you'll be fine. Just buy some food and you'll be fine." Because the whole point is that what we need to do is trust the Lord to take care of us, right? We do what we can, right? The horse is prepared for battle. The battle the battle belongs to the Lord. Wrong stream, but yeah, actually, the companies that he shills for are actually pretty good. But all that to say, the point is, the point is to not be overcome by fear, but instead live out the grace that God has given us. right? That's really the thing. Be wise, and as I say to my kids, I think the best thing the advice that you can give after trust the Lord is don't be dumb.
Mm.
And I think Dwight put it well when he said, I think about, if I'm going to do a thing, would an idiot do that? And if the
You just
answer is
quoted
yes,
The
I
Office.
don't do that thing. I did, because there's some wisdom there.
Oh
But
gosh.
anyway, Chuck, you got anything else for us?
No, man. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad that I could join kind of last minute on
Yeah.
your live performance here. Hopefully, I didn't derail you so bad like Ohio. Is that too
Oh,
soon, or is that too
little too
soon?
soon, but I
My
got
bad.
the reference at least.
Yeah. I got nothing else, man. Just hope people catch us at Fire Theft Radio. We're going to be dropping some stuff soon. Me and you
Yeah.
are going to do an episode by ourselves talking about the rise of toxic stoicism, because stoicism is huge right now, because I think people are desperate to men specifically are desperate to grasp onto masculine figures. So they're looking at Liver King and Marcus Aurelius, and even wise people that I do like as well, like Jordan Peterson and things like that. But there's like, especially if you're a believer, you got to be very careful, because along with a lot of the things that they teach, it gets a little too crazy, including what's his name, Andrew Tate, for example. I think it's
Yeah.
there's a drastic overcorrection of, oh, there's an actual real attack on masculinity, and these men are aware of it, and they, in my opinion, approach it from a secularist perspective, a secular perspective, and it overcorrects in a very weird way, and also dabbles into, of course, the occult and some new agey stuff and things like that. So very dangerous. It can get very crazy really quickly. So we want to address those things coming soon on Fire Theft, and of course Dr. Judd Burton on Saturday.
Yeah,
We're
I'm
going to be
getting Judd
talking
on.
some good stuff. So a lot of good stuff over there. Other than that, this is your show, bro. So
There is a link to firetheftradio.com down in the description down in the show notes. So if you do want to hop over there and take a listen, there's no video, but there is audio over there to listen to. Go ahead and do that, and perhaps depending on when you're listening to this, some of those shows we talked about may actually already be posted. But yeah, so go ahead and do that. And yeah, Chuck, thanks for coming on, especially on short notice. Next week, I don't know who's going to be on, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do. Again, be in prayer for Taryn. Be in prayer for Matt Schumann, and also for us too. We'll accept. That your prayers are being said on our behalf as well. We can always do it. And you know what? We care about you. Maybe some of you watching this and you haven't heard someone say that for a long time. We care about you. We love you. If you need to contact somebody, if you have questions, whatever, feel free to do that. We'd be happy to have a conversation. But until then, as I try to say, Pilgrim on, friends. We'll see you out there. Have fun, but not too much. Have a good one.